Hi, my name is Lauren and I'm in Dr. Murray's MCL class, and this semester we focused on the ability of female leaders to be differentiated from what's perceived as inherent wickedness. So we talked about Cleopatra and the first and only female emperor of China, Wu Zetian, and their perception in historical texts. And there's obviously a large theme. Cleopatra and Wu Zetian weren't good leaders because of problems that seem to be caused by their gender. So it seems that their appearance and their sexuality caused some pretty large-scale problems for them that inhibited them from being good leaders, as well as opposition because of being women. So I decided to focus on some contemporary female French politicians and their perception in the media, and how this may affect their ability to be leaders today. So when typing in a quick Google search for French female politicians, Google actually suggests French female politicians style or French female politicians hot. I wanted to be sure this wasn't just something that was French in general, so I omitted the word female and I typed in French politicians, and the suggestions were French politicians' names and French politicians must embrace literacy. So I guess the question begs, what causes this differentiation between men and women when it comes to politics? Why do women have to be known for their style and beauty when men get to be known for their personal accomplishments and their policies? Well, the difference lies in media representation. So this obviously isn't a new phenomenon. During Cleopatra's reign, she was known as not only being young and naive, but also this beautiful seductress who used her good looks to advance her politically, even though her family already had connections. But her good looks allowed her to be a seductress that helped her become eventually a murderess and then the Queen of Egypt. The negative images of her seem to be perpetuated in Stacy Schiff's book, Cleopatra: Life, where she uses some historical texts, the remaining ones of her, that portray her in a negative light. Stacy Schiff actually chooses to focus on the very sexual nature of Cleopatra and seems to spend a lot of time focusing on what Cleopatra may have looked like, even though that's really not important. I feel like Schiff neglects to really focus on some of Cleopatra's military and political strategy, and that's what I really like to focus on in my paper, is why women don't have their politics focused on. Instead, it seems to be their beauty and their personal character and style. So this is a continuing phenomenon for female Emperor Wu Zetian as well, though it doesn't seem to be as big of a problem, especially in Jonathan Clement's book, Wu, Female Emperor. It's a very sensationalized title, but the book itself seems to be a lot more impartial when it comes to information. He definitely gives what types of biases his sources may or may not have and their connection to her personally. But I'd like to move on to some contemporary French female leaders and their perception in the media today. So I'd like to start with the first and only female French Prime Minister that we've had up to date, and her name is Edith Cresson. She was named by President François Mitterrand in the early 1990s, and her term lasted for only 10 months due to a very negative public backlash against her. The media and opposition actually asked her if she had a sexual relationship with Mitterrand, and if that was the reason why she had been nominated in the first place, even though this is a completely baseless claim. She was a married mother of two and a grandmother at the time, and was actually very qualified for her position. This seemed to still be a very strong argument against her because she's a woman. This actually came just a few years before Sarkozy had some very real sexual affairs with women in his own office, and those were deemed by the media as none of the public's concern. So this is just another example of the double standard that exists for women in political office. Her perceived affair was something that was very scandalous, but the very real affairs of a male leader were none of the public's business whatsoever and did not impact him as a leader. In her very brief term, Cresson made a comment in regards to the sexuality of the Anglo-Saxon man, in particular England, and it wasn't intended to be an insult. It was strictly a public health announcement, and this is a statement that was credited to her 4 years after she had left office in a biography about female French leaders. She stated that she thought approximately 25% of the English male was homosexual. However, when a British House of Commons member by the name of Tony Marlowe heard this, he stated that this comment was made solely because she had not received enough admiring glances the last time that she was in London. Her policies may have been mentioned briefly had they actually been credited to her. Potentially, it's thought that they were hers, though she has not confirmed or denied, but of course it has to only be due to the fact that she was not admired enough by men, so of course she has to make a backlash about it. She's a very spiteful, vengeful woman who only received her position because she was sleeping with the president, according to the media, and because of this she received very negative public attention and was very promptly removed from her position, and Mitterrand declared that he had very strong regrets about this. And I think that her very negative perception in the media and her very short and terrible term, frankly, in office is what has led to the fact that there's not been another female prime minister since, and I don't think there will be for a long time. The second woman that I would like to talk about in female French politics is Christine Lagarde. She's the director of economic monetary funds for their international group. This is the second term that she's served in her position. She receives a lot of attention in the media for her personal style. In Forbes, she's considered as being the most fashionable woman in finance, and she's recently been in the September issue of US Vogue and was on the best dressed list of Vanity Fair. She's known by her peers as being elegant, but this is not something that's considered a compliment. It's used very condescendingly. In fact, Liberation, a French left-wing newspaper, declared that, in a quote in one of their newspapers, "She is an upper-class woman cut off from common people and more preoccupied with her look than their welfare, the way such elegant, chic people are." Christine Lagarde is a upper-class woman, this is correct. However, she comes from money, she has a very well-paying job, and she's not attending her job in haute couture each day. She is a woman in her early 60s. She wears pearl earrings. She has a Birkin bag that has been the subject of many, many international articles, actually. And this is something that, to me, seems to be a bit of an outrage. It's caused a lot of scandal, the fact that she carries an expensive purse. Her jewelry has actually allegedly been removed via Photoshop in a lot of different international publications in order not to upset the masses. Her political position has been questioned because of her personal fashion sense. So her economic moves have not been something that has caused backlash against her. She's served her position twice. She's doing her job well. What she does is something that's good for France. She is good for Europe as a whole. She's good for the EU. She serves her position well, but her peers look down on her because she dresses well. The public looks down on her because she's seen as someone who thinks she's above them because she dresses well, and she receives a lot of negative attention because she dresses well. Now, something to bear in mind is that her predecessor was Dominique Strauss-Kahn, who has recently been arrested in New York City for felony sex charges in an accusation where he sexually assaulted a hotel maid. So, much like the case of Edith Cresson, where she has an example of, this accusation of a sexual affair that has been blown out of proportion, there's a male counterpart who it's just swept under the rug. Well, in the case of Christine Lagarde, she has her style that's been something that's been sensationalized, whereas her predecessor has these felony sex charges against him, and that's something that seems to be swept under the rug as well. Granted, he's not in office anymore. However, massive issues of male politicians seem to be minor in comparison to minor issues of female politicians that are massive. So how does this kind of translate into the representation of women in government in general? Clisson and Lagarde are two very small examples of women in politics, and in reality there's actually a large disparity of women in French politics. With the exception of Greece, French women are the smallest, or the least represented in politics in all of Europe. Only 11% of deputies and less than 6% of the Senate in the National Assembly, are women, and that's comparative to our House of Representatives here in the United States. And only 8% of French mayors are women, and of that 8%, most of those are to villages with a population of less than 700 people. This is not because of the voters. In a study done by a French focus group, 2/3 of the participants would be favorable to a female mayor. Well, what's the cause of this disparity in representation then? Well, here in the United States, a feminist group did an opinion poll on 1,500 people who are potential voters, and their poll revealed the effect of the media when the physical appearance of a candidate was mentioned, a problem that Clisson and Lagarde obviously experienced often in office. The results are actually pretty grim. In every single case, whether or not the coverage was focused on a positive representation of their appearance or a negative representation of their appearance, or even if it was completely neutral, voters were less likely to vote for the candidate in general, and women are much more likely to have their physical appearance mentioned. So what is the size of this problem? Well, as I started my presentation with, when you type in female French politicians, the first thing that comes up is their physical appearance. So this massive representation leads to people being less likely to vote for them, and their experience in office tends to be one that's not pleasurable. Also, if you type in female French politicians and you do not click on hot female French politicians, there would be a list that comes up that's the 20 sexiest female politicians in the world, and none of those are French, but somehow they're still one of the top results. So, something to think on. In conclusion, throughout the centuries, women in politics are more susceptible to have an unfair portrait painted of them throughout the media because of their physical appearance, and one that focuses on their physical appearance. And this causes them to lose some credibility, and in the end, this leads to diminished representation for women in government overall. Thanks.